November 10th, 2019. I offered an idea to Convi, a good friend of mine and an amazing layout creator. I didn't yet know the journey I was about to embark on, but I knew I wanted to tell a story. A story about trying so desperately to find yourself after losing something you thought you could never live without. But what really happened? What is I Don't Wanna Go, and why is it to this day my most significant project? Well, contrary to what I said earlier, this all started on July 27th, 2019. So let's take a very brief journey into my past for contextual reasons. Throughout 2018 and 2019, I was in an on and off relationship, and without getting into detail, the tension broke in spectacular fashion on this aforementioned July 27th. At the time, this was the biggest hit to my heart and mind that I had ever had to deal with. So out of pure emotion and desperation, almost exactly a month later, I would release Never Let Me Go on August 22nd. It was a passion project made in an attempt to externalize how hard I was trying to cope with the loss. And I think I succeeded in that. To this day, I still see people say it's one of their favorite layouts of mine. However, that initial feeling, that heart-wrenching stomach drop of a moment that you feel right as soon as you receive the worst news you've ever heard, was missed. I wanted to capture that moment, that feeling of loneliness and desolation, introducing I Don't Wanna Go, a prequel to Never Let Me Go. Now, I'm going to take you through the project, give a little insight on how I made some of these jaw-dropping, impossible to comprehend effects, some of which taking hundreds of triggers to make. And at the end, I'll go through the whole thing and explain some of the story behind it as well. The first section here is really quite simple, as it takes a lot of decoration. The blocks have opacity and pulse added to them. The strings in the back are simple pulse triggers as well. And the highlight of this part is just some really meticulous glow work that I did with maybe 20 to 30 glow beams. Not efficient, I know, but I had that freedom. This isn't fully decorated after all. The second section here is very simple in concept, but it took so much time to actually make it. I basically assigned every visible block to its own group and slowly used opacity triggers to make them disappear at a random time. Then using what I've been calling an impact pulse or pulse grenade, which I did not invent, don't worry. I'm not trying to coin this, I did not invent that. I also used opacity triggers to very quickly make all of the blocks reappear, starting from the blocks closest to the player and expanding outward. I then continued this in the second half, just opposite. The blocks appear, cluttering the screen using opacity, and then I make them disappear using this impact pulse technique. The first slow section, as good as I think it is really just decoration. A lot of glow work and movements are happening here, as well as my first ever attempt at particles, which as a short rundown are just a few layers of dots at different sizes and opacities moving at different speeds to make a realistic sort of parallax, as well as some good depth. Now, this being my first try, it's not good. But this walked so my later attempts could run, so I'm perfectly fine with how this turned out. Now from here on, I think we're in the best parts of the level, and the section after this was probably my favorite effect in the entire project, which took just over 1,000 triggers to make, so stick around. We speed up going into this key part with a simple opacity gimmick revealing the entire part vertically. But the real highlight of this section is a masking effect that if you watched my Proto Flicker video, you would have seen before. This masking effect is made up of 3 key factors. The first part is this layer of 4 squares that will expand outward, creating a central diamond slowly getting larger. So the second part are the objects that I've layered below these squares, and then the third part are all of these objects that I've layered above these squares. So when the square expands and eventually goes off screen, it will then reveal this new structuring and gameplay underneath. The difference between this effect and the one in Proto Flicker is that this one follows the player's X and Y movements, as well as when it expands, it slightly rotates, whereas in Proto Flicker, it's more focused around an orb and doesn't rotate. The rest of the section is quite self-explanatory, I believe, and if you need me to explain any of this stuff, well, actually, no, that's totally fair if you're not experienced in creating. Most people don't create, actually, so hi, if you're new to creating, hello. Would you guys like for me to make some like tutorials and stuff on like basic stuff for new creators? That actually might be kind of fun. Leave that down in the comments. I'll do that, maybe. I don't know. Now we're on to the most complex of the level by far. So for starters, the rain effect. The rain is made of very thin gradient lines that are on 3 different layers. Each layer has a different size, opacity, and speed to the rain. I then had to go through and put move triggers at just the right moments for all of these 3 different speeds of rain so I could simulate the rain looking endless, when in fact it's just a loop. But the cool thing is since they all move and reset at different times, the effect changes over time and never has the same exact look. Moving on though, we now get to the star of the show. This god-forsaken shrinking effect. Oh my god. This has to be one of the simplest effects to do, but wow, did it take long to actually make. This effect is made up of a series of blocks that shrink in size, and after the initial block pulses, you get a seamless toggle effect happening that makes it look like the block is shrinking. This happens for every block that pulses on screen, and it took me just over 1,000 triggers to do. Why do I spend my time doing this stuff? I have one answer for you. I was sad. That's the reason. That's the whole reason that I do any of these effects that take like 1 billion objects in like 8 hours of my time. I'm bored and I'm sad. So I get cool ideas when I'm bored and I'm sad. So hoop-de-doo. But fun little fact, I did use Build Helper for about half of these until it completely broke on me and started mixing up groups and not putting them in the right order anymore. So about a full day of my life was just changing all of the group numbers for every single block and every single effect by hand. So that's fun. Fix your game, RobTop, please, please, please. Another crazy fact, this part made me run out of groups completely. I had used and reused groups so much by this point that I had lost track of which groups were reusable, even when I was writing notes. So the entire last section of this level is used solely using color triggers, 1 opacity group, and pulse triggers for the background and object color. Having most of my career be in 2.1 and 2.0, I was initially stumped at how I'd make any kind of nice effects with just color triggers. But then the 1.9 creator came out in me, and I remembered that when colors are made black with blending, they become totally invisible. So I could use that to my advantage, making fake opacity and pulse effects using that idea. So that's exactly what I did, rounding out the project with a much lighter, vibrant vibe, concluding with an end screen that I made for Convy and I. Now, story-wise, this project takes place in real time of how I felt dealing with heartbreak, loss, regret, everything. The block's glowing colors is showing the life and joy you once had is now disappearing, being replaced by the gray nothingness that you feel, which is an ongoing theme. The guitar strings in the background symbolize the heaviness of your heart, the anxiety that builds as your chest tightens. They were also just a really nice sync idea that Convy made. This whole project is based on ups and downs. When grieving or accepting how things are, you will have some moments where you feel okay, but those only exist in light of the times where you feel like darkness is all there is. So that's what I worked with. The first cube is representing how lost you feel in your journey. Your path disappears, leaving you to pick up the pieces for yourself. It may seem clouded and impossible to navigate as you become consumed by the pressure, but this is also the first glimmer of hope shown in the project, as when the time is right, your path reveals itself. Then we reach the first slow section. This part is a moment of looking back on old happy memories that you can no longer have. The colored pulses represent those memories as they slowly fade, and eventually you are left alone with just your thoughts. The next large section is our first real glimmer of hope. It shows the fight in your head of having your path start to become revealed. The blocks pulse with color behind you as you just barely missed the answer that could lead you to happiness. The part feels empty, but soon expands with new life and brightness. You eventually catch up to the happiness as you barely catch it as it happens, only to then be caught once more by the reality of the situation. Then we reach the last true downward spiral of emotion. It's raining. You can't think straight. The colored blocks that once represented happiness are now shrinking and disappearing as soon as they arrive. Not long after, it's colorless. It's just you left. But in your darkest moment, you feel one last glimmer of hope. The level opens up into a bright and vibrant section, a new life, a new aesthetic, new potential for improvement. However, there are still multiple paths as a sign that things are still not fully okay. You still have to avoid the bad thoughts, choose the right paths as the wrong ones are so deceivingly correct. But you make it out. You're finally on your way to real improvement, to moving on, to finding yourself again. There's still a long journey to be had, but that concludes the story of I Don't Want to Go. Now, there's a lot more to this full story that I think I could explain and things that I want to explore, but those are going to have to wait for some future projects. So if you guys would like, I can make videos explaining my projects Never Let Me Go and We're Not Alone. Or I could simply talk about the entire series as a whole and what it all means to me. But that's a story for another day. I hope you all enjoyed coming along on this journey with me. I Don't Want to Go was a once-in-a-lifetime moment in my life, and I can't fully explain just how much the support for that project helped me get by. You guys are just amazing. So I'll see you in the next video. Stay real and take care.